On the broadcast tonight, the Korean government has new measures that will boost its exports by another $65 billion and create well over 410,000 new jobs. The U.S. Air Force flies 4 F-22 fighter jets through South Korean airspace in the latest show of force against North Korea over its latest provocations. And a 5-year low. The Korean won weakens against the greenback on growing bets the BOK will lower its policy rate and a drop in oil deter risk-taking. News Center begins right now. Good evening to our viewers in Korea. Hello to those around the world. This is News Center. Dump them all out and pick out only those deemed absolutely necessary, says the Korean president of regulations that may stand in the way of nurturing future growth engines. That's how strongly President Park feels about finding the next export industry that would spur the Korean economy. First, here's our Song Ji-san.
Nothing should stand in the way of companies seeking to develop innovative products and new markets, so the government will do its best to relax regulations on potential growth engines. That's what President Park Geun-hye said Wednesday at the first investment promotion meeting of the year.
신산업의 성장을 가로막는 규제로 의심이 되면 정부 입맛에 맞게 골라서 없애는 것이 아니라 일단 모두 물에 빠뜨려 놓고 꼭 살려내야만 할 규제만 살려두도록 전면 재검토하겠다는 취지입니다.
She also said it's important to strengthen the country's economic fundamentals by boosting domestic demand, so that the country's growth isn't held up by falling exports due to slowing global demand. Seoul will also remove as many regulations as possible, except for those deemed essential, to foster new growth engines that can also create quality jobs in various sectors. One of the sectors is sports, expected to grow into a $40 billion market by next year. That's a 20% rise from 2014 and double the size of Seoul's tourism industry. To expand facilities investment in the sector, the government will allow new gyms to be built in areas designated as greenbelts. Seoul will also allow domestic colleges to build branches overseas to help them export their education services. President Park added that the administration would devise regulations for groundbreaking products like drones and unmanned vehicles after the goods are introduced, as doing otherwise could prevent companies from gaining a foothold in the market during the initial stage of development. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
And the specifics of just how to prop up the economy as initiated by the president, here's our Hwang Ji-hye.
Uber, Airbnb, and TaskRabbit. These are just 3 examples of the so-called sharing economy that's much larger than some might think. Hundreds of millions of people worldwide are now paid for the work they do within these systems, whether that's by driving an Uber cab or doing small jobs for others through websites like TaskRabbit. The global market size has jumped over 10 times in just 4 years. And to foster this industry, Korea is all geared up to strip back regulations. During a meeting to promote investment led by President Park Geun-hye on Wednesday, the government pledged to cut red tape in not just the sharing economy sector, but also in sports, healthcare, and education, some new service industries that are seen as hopeful candidates for the country's next growth engine. The government also plans to immediately push ahead with investment projects currently stalled due to regulations.
We will help 6 investment projects to be carried out and see a lift of around $5 billion in investment.
All this comes as Korea struggles with local companies that have been losing their appetite for aggressive investment in times of slowing global demand. With exports plunging by the biggest margin last month in nearly 6.5 years, job creation is dulling. The youth unemployment rate hit its highest level in 7 months in January, hitting 9.5%, inching up 0.3 percentage points from the same month a year ago. the overall jobless rate was at 3.7%. So while the growth last year mainly came from domestic demand on the back of measures to boost consumption, the government is now hoping to get the corporate sector moving again with the new package that it projects will shake loose around $40 billion worth of investment and create more jobs. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
The United States is ramping up air defense in response to North Korea's recent nuclear test and missile launch. Now, it flew 4 F-22 stealth fighter jets over South Korea today in a show of force, the strength of ROK-U.S. alliance. This is the third strategic weaponry that's been dispatched to South Korea in recent weeks. Arirang's national defense correspondent Kim Hyun-bin.
4 F-22 stealth fighter jets flew over Osan Air Force Base, just south of Seoul, on Wednesday. Were escorted by 4 South Korean F-15s and 4 U.S. F-16s. The F-22s were dispatched from the U.S. Air Base in Okinawa this morning as part of a provisional deployment aimed at pressuring North Korea. A South Korean military official says 2 F-22s will be temporarily stationed at the Osan Air Base.
The F-22 Raptor is the most capable air superiority fighter in the world, and its capability represents one of many capabilities available for the defense of this great nation. The U.S. maintains an ironclad commitment to the defense of the Republic of Korea.
In this grave situation, the combined air forces of South Korea and the United States, with the most powerful combat power, are fully prepared to deter and punish North Korea's further provocations.
The F-22 is a key part of Washington's key strategic weaponry and considered one of the best fighter jets in the world. They are equipped with full stealth capabilities. This means they could infiltrate North Korean airspace undetected and destroy the regime's key nuclear and missile infrastructure before the North knew what hit it. Their range also allows them to target anywhere in North Korea when flown from the south. The F-22s are not the first strategic U.S. weapons deployment here in recent weeks. The U.S. flew a B-52 bomber over the peninsula last month. Plus, the nuclear-powered submarine USS North Carolina docked in Korea's southern city of Busan on Tuesday. The nuclear-powered carrier USS John C. Stennis is also scheduled to take part in the annual South Korea-U.S. defensive drills, Key Resolve and Full Eagle, which start early next month. There's also word a B-2 stealth bomber could also fly over in the coming weeks. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
North Korea can now conduct a nuclear test with little or no advance notice based on imagery observations alone. Now, according to 38 North, a U.S.-based North Korean monitoring site, Pyongyang appears to have altered its test preparation practices in order to make them more difficult to detect, as demonstrated by its fourth nuclear test on January 6th. The site says previous images suggest that the reclusive state may have already finished digging several underground tunnels at its main nuclear test site in Punggye-ri, which would allow them to conduct another test with little or no warning. Meanwhile, South Koreans living abroad have been told not to dine out at North Korean restaurants around the world, although such visits are not illegal. Now, this comes as part of sanctions held up against the North following the recent nuclear and missile provocations. Kim Mo-geun has more.
Seoul's Unification Ministry has urged South Korean nationals living overseas to refrain from visiting North Korean restaurants as part of measures to prevent cash flow to the communist state.
We ask our citizens to avoid dining in North Korean restaurants abroad as part of sanctions against Pyongyang's latest nuclear provocations.
Unification Ministry spokesperson Chung Jun-hee explained that the move came as North Korea has been running such restaurants to earn hard currency for its regime and finance its local activities. According to foreign sources, North Korea operates around 130 restaurants abroad, around 100 of them in China. They are known to generate about $100 million in annual revenues. Meanwhile, Chung also reaffirmed South Korea's stance that the North has used money from the Kaesong Industrial Park to develop its nuclear capabilities. Kim Mo-geun, Arirang News.
Now, the UN Security Council could impose unprecedented sanctions on North Korea as early as next week. That's according to Seoul's ambassador to the United Nations in New York. Well, council members have been drafting a new resolution against Pyongyang ever since the fourth nuclear test more than a month ago. Kwon So-ah with the details.
What's already taking longer than the process of drafting previous resolutions on North Korea appears to be in the final stages. In an interview with Seoul-based news channel YTN, South Korea's ambassador to the United Nations Oh Jun said there is a chance a new UN Security Council resolution on North Korea could be adopted as early as next week. Ambassador Oh says he is expecting stronger sanctions than in existing resolutions once the U.S. and China complete their final mediations on the draft. That's been so far the main obstacle to a swift agreement on the matter, but Chinese sources and media outlets suggest that Pyongyang's closest ally has become a more active participant in the UN talks ever since the North's long-range missile test, which came a month after its nuclear test in January. One expert said Beijing probably won't give a green light to all of Washington's proposals, but that there could be some room for negotiation.
If the decision on the strong measures suggested by the U.S., such as a secondary boycott or sanctions on trade or exchanges of human resources, is left for related countries to decide on independently, China could uphold its pattern of consideration for its ally and not accept Washington's view 100%.
Backing up the prospects for a swift adoption of the resolution, an official at Seoul's foreign ministry told reporters after Tuesday's high-level talks between South Korea and China in Seoul that Beijing saw eye to eye with South Korea on sanctions that would hurt North Korea. The official added that the bilateral talks made up a much larger portion of the meeting in Seoul than the possible deployment of the U.S. missile defense system THAAD in South Korea, to which China objects, and that the Chinese side briefed Seoul in detail on the current progress at the UN headquarters. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Seoul has issued another warning to Tokyo. Do not undermine the agreement between Korea and Japan on the so-called comfort women. Now, this is in response to Japan's latest claim that the Japanese military did not force Korean women into sex slavery during World War II. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
The government calls on Tokyo to refrain from making remarks that hurt the purpose and the spirit of the agreement on wartime sexual slavery, and demonstrate through its actions its determination to restore the dignity of the surviving victims and heal the wounds of their past.
South Korea's foreign ministry released a statement on Wednesday in response to Japan's latest denial that its government and its military had forced Korean women to serve as sex slaves during the Second World War.
The Japanese government has not been able to confirm the forced recruitment of the so-called comfort women in any records.
Deputy Foreign Minister Sugiyama Shinsuke was speaking on Tuesday when he delivered Japan's interim report to the UN Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. It's the latest in a series of similar remarks from Japan last month, with Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida insisting that the term sex slave shouldn't be used. This has given rise to doubts about Japan's sincerity towards the landmark agreement it reached with Korea last December, in which Japan officially acknowledged its military's involvement in forcing Korean women into service as sex slaves. In Geneva on Tuesday, Sugiyama mentioned the agreement briefly, saying Tokyo is making efforts to implement it and it expects the same from Seoul. According to Kyodo News, the deputy minister told reporters after the session that the Japanese government will continue to make its stance on the comfort women issue known to the international community. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Let's now shift our focus to the nation's political realm. The floor leader of the main opposition to the Minjoo Party of Korea delivered his address to the National Assembly today. Now there, he vowed to reopen the now suspended inter-Korean joint industrial complex in the North Korean border city of Kaesong. Our Shin Se-min has more on what Lee Jong-gul had to say.
Reopening the Kaesong Industrial Complex. That's the promise made by the main opposition Minjoo Party of Korea's floor leader Lee Jong-gul during his address to the National Assembly on Wednesday.
It was hoped the jointly run Kaesong Industrial Complex could breathe new life into the Korean economy, which had been struggling to find new growth engines. And I vowed to revive the park by enacting a special law.
Lee also promised to restore dialogue and strengthen ties between the two Koreas once the party brings about a sweeping victory in an upcoming general elections in April. Criticizing the Park administration's handling of North Korea issues, Lee called for a full-scale reorganization on the foreign affairs, security, and unification fronts. He also called on Unification Minister Hong Young-pyo to step down. Hong has been under fire for claiming that 70% of the wages made by the North Korean workers at the Inter-Korean complex were used to fund the regime's weapons development programs, and backtracking that claim a day after, saying that he did not have the evidence to back up. The opposition party floor leader also called for bipartisan cooperation amid the ongoing security crisis and urged the related ministries to carefully consider the matter of deploying the U.S. missile defense system known as THAAD. Lee added that South Korea has been able to maintain peace and prosperity without the defense program and said national security should be the main consideration in deployment of such an advanced system. Speaking to the members of the assembly, Lee also urged that his party is seeking for ruling Saenuri Party's cooperation in passing a series of contentious bills. But the odds of that narrow considerably as the ruling party criticized Lee's remarks, saying that it is politically motivated ahead of the April's general elections. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Korea's ruling party and the main opposition have completed candidate registrations for April's general elections. But this may not mean much in the end, as the parliament is still racing to redraw the country's electoral map. Our Kim Young-gil has more on what appears to be the start of a campaign season.
Korea's rival parties have tallied their candidate registration numbers ahead of a fast-approaching general election on April 13th. 829 people register for the ruling Saenuri Party and 371 for the main opposition Minjoo Party, according to the party's candidate nomination committees. Saenuri Party chairman Kim Moo-sung said Wednesday the results are telling.
Our party outpaces the opposition when comparing the registration results. The numbers are a sign of support for the party's platform of reviving the economy and improving people's livelihoods through reform.
Kim went on to promise the party would conduct a fair and transparent selection process to find the best candidates for their respective constituencies. Hong Chang-sun, the Minjoo Party's nomination committee chief, attributed the ruling party's high numbers to the recent formation of the People's Party, which it said had split the count on the liberal side. There are no registration numbers yet for the newly minted minor opposition People's Party, which is still working out its nomination rules. The Minjoo Party said its top priority is selecting candidates who can help improve the party's image and who have the capacity to develop their constituencies. The next step for each party will be a round of primaries starting next month, but there are lingering concerns about the potential for a chaotic process as lawmakers have yet to reach agreement on redrawing Korea's electoral map, which expired at the end of last year. National Assembly Speaker Chung Lee-hwa has set a deadline of Tuesday for the passage of the constituency bill and vowed to use the authority of his position to bring it up for a vote if parties can't reach agreement before then. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
The Korean won fell to the lowest level in well over 5 years today, as the U.S. dollar rebounded on investors' appetite for safe assets and a wide expectation for a cut in this country's key interest rate. Our Kim Minjoo reports on what happened on Seoul's foreign exchange counter today and why.
The Korean won fell sharply against the U.S. dollar on Wednesday.
The local currency closed at over 1,227 won against the greenback, the lowest level in 5 years and 7 months.
This comes after rising speculation that the country's central bank will cut interest rates down the line after one policymaker called for a reduction at a monetary meeting a day earlier.
The Bank of Korea on Tuesday kept its rate steady at a record low of 1.5% for the 8th straight month.
The dollar has strengthened since late last week, and after a monetary meeting, appetite for the currency has increased.
On top of that, the stronger dollar comes on the back of investors' risk-averse sentiment as a deal to freeze, not cut, oil production fueled fears of further supply glut, leading to a drop in global oil prices.
Since this means the same amount is going to be produced, there's not going to be a drive to lower prices, as there's a huge ongoing gap between demand and supply, and with Iran to boost production to regain market share after years of sanctions, the situation doesn't look too good for now.
On the local bourse, Korean stocks ended lower, with the benchmark Kospi shedding over 0.2% and the tech-heavy Kosdaq losing 1.8%. Kim Minjoo, Arirang News.
Now, the Korean government is stepping up efforts to prevent a Zika virus outbreak in this country after the World Health Organization declared the spread of this virus a global health emergency, which was, of course, earlier this month. But rest assured, pregnant women in this country without history of overseas travels in recent months do not have to worry about contracting the virus. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The government is taking precautionary measures against a possible spread of the Zika virus in Korea, although it cites low possibilities of an outbreak. The director of the Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Chung Ki-seok, said the country has not confirmed any case of the virus in the country so far, and adds secondary infections are unlikely. As of Wednesday morning, there have been 50 suspected cases of the Zika virus in Korea, but of them, 46 cases have already been tested negative for the virus. The remaining 4 cases are still under observation. Chung says pregnant women residing in the country who have not traveled to infected areas don't have to worry about contracting the virus yet. But the government says it's not taking any chances when it comes to the Zika virus. Health authorities will conduct a nationwide mosquito control drive for 10 months starting April this year.
We will focus on boosting inspections in cities with subtropical climates, including Busan, Dongyong, and the island of Jeju.
Airplanes and ships that have departed from infected areas will be required to put down insecticides and submit a formal certification to the government before entering the country. Authorities will also strengthen monitoring procedures at Korea's main gateway, Incheon International Airport, by installing more thermal cameras and increasing the number of staff. And if a local patient is confirmed to have contracted the Zika virus, measures will be put into place so that the patient can be immediately quarantined at a medical facility for treatment. The Zika virus, which can be transmitted through mosquito bites, is suspected of causing microcephaly. The incubation period for the virus is known to last 2 weeks, but the survival period, where the virus's pathogen, is currently not yet clearly defined. The World Health Organization said the Zika virus has spread across at least 30 countries and has been linked to thousands of birth defects in Latin America. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
U.S. President Barack Obama has scolded Republican presidential candidates for statements and policies he claims are damaging America's relations overseas. Bruce Harrison is live in the studio with me with a look at a very divided United States. Now, Bruce, things are so intense at home that President Obama took the time out of the ASEAN summit in California to call out Republican candidates.
That's right, Kanyang, and this is probably the strongest language we've heard from the U.S. president yet about the Republican field. He more or less said he's confident Americans would reject billionaire businessman Donald Trump. He also called out some of the other candidates as well. He said American voters are sensible and they know the president has the ability to authorize a nuclear strike and send troops to war.
Wow, so he just right out said no to Donald Trump.
He said Americans are sensible enough that they know the power the president has. They're not going to vote for Donald Trump.
Right. Specifically, Bruce, which policies do you say that other countries are most concerned about?
Immigration and climate control. About climate control, he said that other countries rely on the U.S. to back sound science, and Republican resistance to combat climate change is troubling to the international community. And now the president's also battling Republicans over the appointment of U.S. Supreme Court Justice, a U.S. Supreme Court Justice, following the recent death of conservative Justice Antonin Scalia. Some U.S. senators have said they'll block Obama's appointee or even refuse to hold a confirmation hearing. Obama challenged them, saying he'll do his job until the end of his term, and he expects senators to do their jobs too.
It's the one court where we would expect elected officials to rise above day-to-day politics. And this will be the opportunity for senators to do their job. Your job doesn't stop until you're voted out or until your term expires.
Republicans argue it's improper for Obama to appoint a Supreme Court justice in his final year. The president says there's nothing in the Constitution to prevent an appointment, and Scalia's spot needs to be filled.
Right, and Hillary Clinton said that President Barack Obama is the president of the United States of America until January 20th. 2017.
That's correct.
That is correct, I guess, in the books. Now, 3D printing is largely known for producing toys and models, but obviously researchers in the U.S. have revealed body parts may be a possibility as well. And this is really, if realized, it's a breakthrough in regenerative medicine.
Yeah, we're potentially talking about creating body parts in a lab, and so far the technology seems to be on the way towards making that breakthrough. So far, scientists at Wake Forest University have printed 3 types of human-sized bone, cartilage, and muscle tissue. That tissue was then transplanted into rats and mice, where it was still survived for weeks or month after being implanted. It's potentially a giant step that could lead to replacement tissue and organs in humans. This study was published by those researchers in the journal Nature Biotechnology.
Wow. And what are some other body parts that they have experimented with?
The human skull, an ear, and a jawbone. And one of the scientists, Kun Young, told the BBC that the way they hope this works, for example, a patient comes in missing a segment of the jaw. They'll be able to scan that missing segment and then print an exact replica to fit that hole.
Wow. Another very important part of the 4th Industrial Revolution that we as human race are faced with.
It's incredible.
All right, Bruce, thank you so much for that.
No problem.
It was a beautiful day here in Seoul, although a bit brisk and windy. So, what does the weather have in store for us for the rest of this week? Let's head over to our Lee Ji-hyun for some answers. Ji-hyun, I don't have much to complain about the weather today.
Right, I totally agree with you. It was beautiful, but as you said, winds brought down sensory temperatures, but again, skies across the nation were truly a sight to behold, in addition to very good air quality today.
Right, very fresh. And keeping my fingers crossed that these conditions will stay with us for the time being at least, but I dare ask you, what about tomorrow?
Well, not as good as today for the metropolitan areas, as we'll kick off the day under partly sunny skies. Then this trough in the northwest will bring down either a mix of rain or snow to the northern parts of the country, including here in the capital, while southern provinces will have a partly sunny skies all day long tomorrow. So how much rain or snow will we get? Light rain of up to 5 millimeters is expected for Seoul and the surrounding areas, and about 1 to 5 centimeters of snowfall for parts of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces till tomorrow night. But temperatures, it should remain above the seasonal averages. It's going to be even milder than today, so let's take a closer look. Daily low here in Seoul will start out at -1 degree Celsius, 3 for Daegu, and Busan and Jeju will start out the day at 2 and 3 respectively. And as for the daily highs, daily high here in Seoul will be a couple of notches higher than today, topping out at 7 degrees Celsius, 10 for Daegu and Daejeon, 11 for Busan and Gwangju, and Jeju will see a high of 12 degrees Celsius. Now, there should not be a big drop in temperatures even after tomorrow's precipitation. Things will remain near these seasonal averages under a good amount of sunshine. Now, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And in their nice and warm indoor pool there. That is our broadcast on this Wednesday night. I'm Moon Gun-young. Thank you for watching. We hope to see you right back here same time tomorrow on NewsCenter.